Okay, everyone, welcome back to another shiur. So let's jump right in today, and Happy New Year's, 2026. I didn't even realize until we had Mike shared it with us. Let's continue delving into this amazing piece. It gets, if you thought this was good, Mike, but wait, there's more. We'll sell you the 1999 Michael Jordan rookie card. You know, the infomercials. You know, that's good, but there's more. What we're now going to shift to, what we began last week, talking about the collective consciousness and the historical way in which souls travel. And that we're going to talk about, in simple words, souls are getting bigger. And the complete reversal of so many things we're used to hearing. We're used to hearing so much about erudite HaDoros. The generations are getting weaker and weaker in spirituality. What's going to be with the next door? And Rav Kook does a complete reversal of that, a complete 180 on this. And what Rav Kook is now going to talk about, which we ended with last week, is Aliyat HaDorot. How the generations are getting higher and higher and higher. In Rav Kook's world, in the world of tzaddikim, specifically Rav Kook, there's only one way in which the world is moving towards, and that's called Geula. That's called revealing Hashem's light in the Olam HaTachton, in the darkest place. That's Olam Hazeh, right? So Rav Kook is always working this out. In Rav Kook's mind, he's always working out how is the Or Hashem being revealed in what seems to look like a yerida, what seems to look like chaos, confusion, and pain, what he's been describing, how we know Hakol Tovah, and ultimately it's Hashem's way of moving the world forward. And I'm just going to add on this, I once heard in the name of the Chafetz Chaim, that he said, what is the most important Ani Mamins, I believe. So he said the most important Ani Mamin is the last one. I believe in Tchias HaMesim and Mashiach. Because if you believe in that means you believe in all the other ones. You know? That one is Kolel, includes all the other Ani Mamins. So it's the same thing. Like in Rav Kook's world, Ani Mamin, Bevias HaMashiach. So everything is working towards that. And what he's going to show us today, and what we began, is that it's not that the Torah became weaker, it's not that the Torah became less, but the souls have gotten significantly stronger. And the old vessels have broke, and the new light has come in, which we began with, and the structures that hold the light, the kalim, the kli, that holds the or, shattered. And now what we need is a new structure, a new thing to be developed in order to meet the demands of the thirsty souls. It's like I once saw also in the Ramad Wali, he says, I think it's the pasuk in Amos, the famous pasuk that says, I think it's in Amos, maybe it's in Micha, but that says that at the end of days there's going to be a hunger in the world, right? Lo rav lalechem, lo rav lemayim. Ki litzmo alidvar Hashem, right? There's going to be hunger in the world. It's not going to be for bread. It's not going to be for water, but it's going to be to hear the word of God. That's what it's going to be. It's not going to be for Torah in a certain way, right? It's not going to be for it's not going to be a physical hunger, right? But it's going to be a spiritual yearning. It's going to be a spiritual hunger, right? And this is exactly what we're talking about here, that the souls have risen from history until our current moment, and certainly Rav Kook is writing this in his day, right? The souls have risen so much that there's this longing for something deeper, this longing for something more real, more authentic. So, again, Rav Kook takes the whole idea of erudite HaDoros, and he flips this on his head. And what we're going to see is through how history and the Taluch HaNeshama, the Nishmas Yisrael, how it works, how it's all. So he's going to pull back the curtain a little bit. And it's amazing. It's awesome. right? Like this is, I think, one of the quintessential paragraphs or two in this Meimor itself. Because he's going to show how the whole thing got flipped on its head. That normally power goes from top down. It goes from high to low, and that's how Kedusha flows. But where we're going to see is just a foreshadow that the neshamas have risen and the gedolim have gotten weaker, he says. And therefore, there becomes this diffusion of light. So instead of light being sharp like a laser, the light gets diffused and it covers more ground. Because the hamonam has become more educated and they've been risen, right? So it's normally, again, Kedusha goes from top down, but Rav Kook is now going to say it's diffused and now it becomes equal. So the power and balance gets put in other people's hands. And we're going to see, right? It's awesome. So you have this. Hold up the sheet. Which one? Which paper do you have? Is the first one, right?
I don't know which one's
Yeah, that's what I'm showing. That one's the first one. There's like a line on the side over there, in between the paragraphs.
First word.
Poel, it's the first word on the page. But we're going to skip to the last line of the second paragraph. There's it says the first word online is shehi. Okay, I'm just giving this as a runner to where, even though we did this line last week. Va'achshav, but now, haklal nitmorim al nisramam al cheshbona al ishim hapratit, shezeu beklal mahalach todat anushit. But now the mass have risen, right? And it's been risen because of individuals have taught it, and it's risen. But this is the way the souls work, okay? Now he's going to explain exactly how exactly the klal was mitromain, that there's an elevation of the generation. Berove tkufot hahistoria, and this is again classic Rav Kook, like showing in history how this happened, Berove tkufot hahistoria. In many of the tkufas of history, the time periods of history, anachnu motziin chachamim na'alim, gidolei ruach bedorot harishonim. We see amazing, exalted, wise people that were strong in spirit in the earlier generations, right? You go back even just a generation or two, you have the Chafetz Chaim, you have Rav Kook, but you go further back, you have, the great tzaddikim, the Baal Shem Tov and the Gra, you go further back, you have Tanayim, you have the Rishonim, you have the Rambam, and you go times of the Gemara, and you go all the way back, you have Nevi'im, right? You have an Avram Avinu, right? Avram Avinu was like this, the God of Abraham, who's discovering, monotheism in a paganistic time, So you had Baal, amazing people. Shanu mishtayim al gadolam, shanu mishtayim al gadlam va'ozrucham. That we're astounded by their amazing eruditeness. We're astounded by their amazing levels. Aval haklal hu haya natun b'shafel hamatzif. But the general people, the hamonam, the simple people, they were in a very low state. Bein b'das, bein b'musar, whether it was in spiritual awareness or whether it was in ethics. Emes ki na'ale mikol hamon haya, hamon imanu, mitzad hakedusha, Elohis hachofefes alav, v'hilanes. Yes, it's true that the hamonam, in compared to other relationships and compared to other nations, our hamonam was mitzad their intrinsic kedusha and the divinity that surrounds them. Our hamonam, our simple Jews, were considered very, very high, and that's considered a miracle, right? So it's like, if you think about this, like you learn Rabbi Nachman, right? You learn Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim. So what was going on with the Baal Shem Tovs and Talmidim? Basically, life was horrible, okay? Life was terrible in Europe. Life was terrible in Ukraine. And the Jews were getting beaten up every single day. You had Cossacks coming, and you had all sorts of pogroms, and you had everything. But what you had the idea of the Rav. There was the Rav, and you had the Posek, and the Rav sat in his house all day and night, and he learned. And once in a while, you'd ask him a question. You had a question, you had a shaila in, did you shech the chicken right? Did you not shech the chicken right? You had a question of Pidyon Shvuim, and you'd knock on the doors the Rav's house. So the Rav would come once or twice a year, Shabbos Hagadol, and different things. He'd come out, and he'd give a fiery drasha. And basically, the simple people didn't know anything, right? Like, in comes the story of Rav Shlomo Karlach, like the holy Schneid, the holy Taylor, like he was so simple, but he was really a tzaddik, right? So in comes the Baal Shem Tov, and what does he say? He says, the hamonam, you're good too. You're simple Tehillim. It's like the tzaddikim's yechudim, Even you could be great, right? And why was that such a chiddush? Because basically the hamonam didn't know anything. They were illiterate, they were uneducated. I don't know if they were necessarily illiterate per se, but they were uneducated. Of course, it was better than the people around us. Of course, they were more educated than the Cossack, than whatever it was. But basically, they didn't know much. So you had a split. You had the hamonam, and you had the regular people who didn't really know much. Life was terrible. I can't overstate how bad life was. Right? There's no romanticization of, I was listening to some, I think it was like a Shmuel Kunda thing, and they have this song, Shabbos and Kvetchmir. Shabbos and Kvetchmir was this magical Shabbos. I mean, was it really such a magical Shabbos? I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. But I could imagine, in Ukraine with snow and no roads. Now, look how it is with roads. How bad is it without roads, And then they have this romanticized version of Shabbos and Kvetchmir. I know Shabbos in Beit Shemesh is really nice, The streets are closed. There are people out going to shul. People have air conditioning and heating and proper shelter. People have good clothing and shoes. It's 100% better than Shabbos and Kvetchmir, And so there's this romanticization because the Amma Arts didn't know much. And then you have the simple people. And the Baal Shem Tov came along, Rabbi Nachman came along, and the tzaddikim came along and said, no, you're simple avoda, be happy, you're a Jew, right? Have simple emunah, have simple faith. And that spread like wildfire, obviously, right? Because the Baal Shem Tov was already speaking to the risen souls of the generation that even though in practice, per se, they weren't doing much, right? They didn't know, they were saying Tehillim, or they'd come to some drasha, but those drushas, they were filled with fear and terror and all different types of scolding, that the Rav was, and they were moved by it to some degree, but eventually that stopped working. And again, the Baal Shem Tov came around and he started being mechazik. No, that's not the way. Every Jew could reach high levels. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. B'hasher Usham, Hashem comes to you, and disseminating all these ideas in Panemius that were there and emphasizing them. Right, and Rabbi Nachman said, you do serve Hashem with simcha, right? You did all these simple things that anyone could do, that shava l'kol nefesh. And he was saying that the souls have essentially risen. And therefore we now need to demand, and there's a new paradigm, there's something new that needs to be introduced to Klal Yisrael. And this was like an amazing thing. It spread like wildfire. So you had great giants, but the hamonam didn't know much. And continuing, B'doros ha'achronim hitchilu ha'anakim lihitma'et va'klal holech u'metaleh. These are pivotal lines. But in later generations, that's already starting, and I'm saying from the Baal Shem Tov and Rav Kook, is talking about later generations in his time, right? Hitchilu ha'anakim lihitma'et. The giants, the great tzaddikim, right? There's not a Yechezkel Hanavi anymore. There's not a Yeshaya Hanavi. There's not an Avram Avinu. There's not a Rambam, there's not a Rashba, there's not a Ritva, right? There's not a Rebbe Akiva, right? The giants began to get lowered. Va'klal holech u'metaleh. But the general people, they start to rise. Right? Ba'amenu nitma'u taborim. And in our nation, the borim, the people that are just boring, the bores, the empty-headed, the amaratzim, right? Have began to become fewer, minimized. V'lu'umatam nitma'u v'hiktanu hagonim v'tzaddikim. But alongside, adjacent to that, there is a parallel process of the geniuses and the tzaddikim becoming less, right? You have more people learning in yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael now than since the time of Chizkiyahu. In the last 2,000 years. The regular person now, Joe from Jew, knows more in his pinky, right? Scholarship is up. People are learning. You go to the Mir, go to any random base medrash, go to any regular yeshiva, and the amount of that people know, that everyone in this room, because there's 1 million people here, everyone in this room, right? The amount that you know in your pinky is more than the Am Haaretz knew 200 years ago. Is more than the Am Haaretz knew 500 years ago when they were in the Venetian ghetto. That wasn't 500 years ago, but it was more than, right? The amount that people know and how much Torah is being in every art scroll, daily dose, 1 minute, 2 minute, WhatsApp groups, everything. It's incredible. But on the other hand, we don't have a Baal Shem Tov. We don't have a Rav Kook. We don't have a Rabbi Nachman. We don't have the Vilna Gaon. We don't have a Ramchal. We don't have a Leshem. Even Reb Chaim. We don't have a Reb Chaim. We don't have a Stipler. Not going all that far back, right? B'tekufas hanamahara shel achshav hadavar bolei limaod. And in our period that we're living in, and Rav Kook is saying about his period now, right, in the early 1900s, b'tekufat hanamahara shel achshav hadavar bolei limaod. But in the time period that we're in now, this is very, in the fast-paced environment that we're in now, this is very evident. V'zos haliyah shal, now, so this is amazing, right? V'zos haliyah shal klal hamoni hasiba gamkein hayirida. But this aliyah, this elevation of the generation of the simple people, this also caused a yirida. This was aliyah, this was yirida l'tzarech aliyah l'tzarech yirida, right? The very fact that the souls have, right, the gedolim became less, and the regular am has become more, right? It's like, like anything anyone says, I could open up a Shulchan Aruch and I could just learn it myself, right? There's no real authority nowadays, right? So the diffusion of light has become put in the hands of podcasters. Or you could have a Rav, it used to be a Rav would give a drasha in the shul, and I don't know how many people are in the shul, 100 people are in the shul. Now you give a shiur on YouTube and 1,000 people listen to it. 200 people listen to it. 300 people listen to it. Rav Ephraim Pavlov, what's his name?
Incredible,
Palvanov. I don't know. 50,000 people listen to his shiur every time he puts out a shiur. And he's just, I don't want to say he's a regular guy. He's obviously makes himself look like a regular guy. And he puts a shiur on YouTube. 50,000, right? That's a greater audience than a movie theater. You know what I'm saying? It's remarkable, right? But the fact that the collective consciousness have risen, right? This was also Yerida. Why? Shadorhu motze es kol mashu shomeh v'roeh mehorim umorim katan me'ercho. Because now the generation, anything they see and hear happens from less refined teachers, right? So because the teachers are now on a lower level, the gedolim are on a lower level, so now who's educating your child? Someone on a lower level is educating your child. And it could be that person might be willing to sabotage your children, right? Separate story, right? Point being is that who's teaching now? It's not a Reb Chaim. It's not a Vilna Gaon. It's not a Baal Shem Tov, right? So the teachers have gotten less. The teachers have gotten lower. So you're having the education is not as strong. As musarim enu lokeach es levavo ve'enu mashbir et somo. So because the gedolim have gotten the educational system, the teachers, the hamonam got stronger, the gedolim got less. They meet someplace in the middle, and because of that, the education and the ethics and the messages being passed down have not captivated the hearts of the generation and has not satisfied the thirst of the regular hamonam. It has not satisfied the hunger of the people because they're getting a watered down version. They're not getting the purest thing. Gam eno matil alav shum emo upachad, and it doesn't place upon them also any. This is an amazing thing, right? It's just everything he says here is. It's like goes straight in, everything. It's amazing how, if you say this nowadays, you're like, maybe you could put in chayrim or something like that, now you can understand, he was was taking a direct swipe at the gedolim of his equals, of the generation, right? He was like, you can understand why this might be controversial, right? Because he's saying, yeah, it's not what it used to be, right? Gam, and this is what he's going to say now about fear-based models and shame-based models of teaching, right? Gam eno matil alav shu me'ema upachad, and therefore it's not placed upon the generation any fear or scared. Shekvar his'ale betchunaso milios mamid opi lechai mipnei bricha mipachad ezashiyah. Right? Because the generation has risen up to a certain level where they can now stand in the face and they don't get scared and they do not run away from any fear whatsoever. Bein mechushe bein tziyuri, right? Whether it is sensed or imagined, perceived fear. Bein chomre bein ruchni, whether it's physical fear or whether it's spiritual fear. Meaning to say the generation has risen to a point where fear no longer works. They've become allergic and immune to fear. Awesome, right? Tzaros hislaos, right? Tzaros hislaos hanoros asohu linokesh va'od. The tzaros of the tzaros, the pains and the afflictions that have come upon us has made us hardened and strong. Ad shekol ba'alot upchatim lo yazuhu, until all the scared and the pressure and the fear and the submission and the external compliance no longer works and doesn't do anything to an individual, right? So it's like fear-based models of submission and compliance and twisting them arm. Look what's going to happen to you if you're on your cell phone, another thing. And right, if you tell them, you don't actually educate them, right? So it doesn't do anything, right? Do you know, right, the thing of trashing the outside world and saying it's only here, people are allergic to that, right? So the old way of fear, authority, and submission and external compliance, right, doesn't meet the expanded consciousness, autonomy, the emotional depth, right? Like someone told me recently, an individual, he was saying he grew up in a very limited capacity where this was modeled through and through the entire system in which he was raised in, right? And he said to me he was arguing with his wife the other day about voting. He said when he grew up, voting, you did whatever the rabbis in his area said. And he bought into that. He's like, that's right. You vote one way, right? He goes, now this was a side thing, but he completely rejects that. He says, who is someone to tell me how to vote? But his wife is still into it. So he's telling me he's arguing with his wife about voting. He's like, no. His wife's like, this is what they say. This is what they say. You have to do it. And he's like, what do you mean? Who could tell you to vote? Right? The idea of taking away, this is a different thing, rabbis in politics, right? When did we enter the political realm in that type of way, right? But what he's saying is, it's a new thing. Meaning to say, the ability to take away someone's autonomy, that they no longer have a choice or say in their own personal lives, people are now rejecting that. And Rav Kook is speaking exactly to that. You want to take away someone's autonomy, you want to take away their ability to make decisions for them. Rav Kook is saying that's the old way, but there's a new way. Right? And because you're now using these types of control, systemic control on the individuals of the generation, that no longer works. Sorry, there's a new thing that's going on. And that, it's because the Gedolim, the way of history is the Gedolim have gotten less, but the collective consciousness has risen. Is that amazing? Have you ever seen this written anywhere? You might have maybe felt that, You might have maybe felt something like that on your own. But you never say such a thing,
One enable the other? Is that
Say?
Is saying that one enable the other, that because the Gedolim, at the same time, it's like the scale?
Right, so he's saying that he's saying, I guess, two or three things in this short little words, right? He's saying, one is that this is the way of history, that neshamas get higher. But as neshama gets higher, there's a yerida mitoch the gedolim, right? That the gedolim get less because the collective consciousness now raises to a higher level, and therefore the gedolim are less, right?
There's only a certain amount of, let's say, holiness that could be in the world. So
no, he's saying that the holiness is diffused and spread upon the hamon.
Right.
That's what he's saying. So it's not that there's only a certain amount of holiness in the world, but it's what used to be laser and razor. Like I was thinking of like the idea of a laser beam, like when go to Uman, you get those lasers that shine to everywhere into the clouds, right? So it's like they used to be the gedolim were like lasers, and they were lit up the world. Like it says by Avram Avinu, the Medrash says in Parshas Lech Lecha, it says that Avraham was looking at the world, and what did he see? A bira dolekes. He saw a palace on fire, lit up. Okay, it was either on fire or it was lit up, right? And he was wondering, he was wondering, Mia Balabira, who's the owner of this thing? And Heitzitz the Balabira, and the Balabira, the owner of the palace, came at him and said, I'm the Balabira. And then it opens up Lech Lecha, right? So what does that mean? What's the deeper interpretation? So the Meshalach explains, and he says amazing things over there, right? But one of the things that he says is that there were 10 generations from Avram to Noach, and he was wondering, who created? What's the tachlis of this world? Who created all this, right? Proof by design. Who created this balabir? It's amazing. And what's the bira dolekes? What's the palace on fire? That's his emunah. That his emunah was lighting up the world. That there was a bira on fire. He was setting the world ablaze with his emunah. And he was wondering, how did all this happen? How was my neshama chosen to wonder about the tachlis and the chemdas, all the desires of this world? So he was setting the bira on fire, that there was this razor sharp light descending into the world, this laser beam, surgical light coming from Avram that was lighting up the world, and even those lasers, if you get the blue laser, it could actually burn through the paper, right? The white and blue lasers, not the green lasers, So he was burning up the world, So it's like you had an Avram Avinu, right? But the entire world was pagan, believed in multiplicity, So what happens is that light now gets, okay, you hear what I'm saying? That light gets diffused throughout the world. That's remarkable, right? We don't have an Avram Avinu in the same way, But all the souls have become higher, most people, even nowadays, we've learned this in the Rav Kook shiur, most people don't believe in paganism. Most people are monotheistic. That's huge. So there's a diffusion that happens, even on a big level. Right. Hu muchsher, so he's talking about the generation again. Hu muchsher rak litromeim lelechet be'orach hachaim holeches lamala lamaskil. Right? The generation is prepared in order to only go up and up and up in understanding. But the generation itself, even if it wanted to be, it can't be bent over. It can't be coerced v'shachuach and low. Nosa ol v'natal. It can't carry the burden and take it. Asher lo yuchal limtso b'tocho rosham shel or achayim l'das v'regesh. Right, next page. Asher lo yuchal limtso b'tocho rosham shel das or achayim l'das v'regesh. Right? It can't find within itself the imprint of the light of life, l'das v'regesh, in mind and in feeling. Hu lo yuchal l'shuv miyira. The generation cannot return out of fear and scare tactics. Aval me'od muchshir hu l'shuv me'ahava sheyiras hisroimimus tischaber ima. But you know what the generation can do? You know what the generation is prepared to do? Return out of love. Love, 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 love me do. You know that I love you. Right? Sing that to your kids. Right? The generation is very prepared to return to love. Right? And you wonder, why people like Rabbi Kalish, just love the kids. Right? What's Avi Fishoff's message? Just love your children. Don't tie your love to anything. Unconditional love. Right? Have healthy attachments. Just love your kids. That's your job. Love your children. Right? Teach them love. The Zroimus tischaber ima. Bepoel, now he says something. He says this, he keeps throwing this line in every once in a while we see. Bepoel, od lo hotziu shum dover lamaseu dorena hanirash. But everything we're saying up until now, everything we're saying, Rav Kook says, we have not seen actualized in my generation. Right? So Rav Kook is saying, yes, we're talking about the Zionists, and yes, we're talking about Berliner and Echad Ha'am and all these poets, and yes, we're talking about the Zionists who want to throw off religion at all costs and felt Eretz Yisrael, we no longer need the Torah and mitzvahs, and we should adapt more socialistic ideas in our land, be like Nefesh Yehudi Homiyah, right? Be like a nation like all the other nations, like it says in Sefer Shmuel, we want to be a nation like all the Goyim, right? All the nations. So he says, yes, all that's true, and everything I'm saying is completely imperceptible. Everything I'm saying has not happened yet. Everything I'm saying is only in potential and has not been realized. Right? So he's speaking to the depths. Right? But I think what we can say, in our generation that we're living in right now, this has been realized. This has began to be realized. So even though in Rav Kook's generation, he's speaking to the underlying consciousness and to the depths, to the inner world of the way what's actually going on in the world, in our generation now, this has been realized. In our generation, it's not fully realized, but in our generation, this has been realized. Aval b'koach yesh lo rav, but in potential, there's a lot there. Dor kizeh hayotze lehoreg, this generation that's going out to kill, be'oz nefesh b'shvil matorah shehein nizgavos lefideo, for moral ideas and things, right? The Zionists, they're going out. You had the Lechi, you had the Palmach, you had all these vigilante groups, and there was a certain idealism in the world. This generation, they're willing to be Mesiras Nefesh and live and die for their values, according to whatever it is that they think. V'chelik rosha mimenu rak mitzad regesh hayosher, and this imprint has come upon them from the ability of feeling and what they feel is right. Hatzedek ve'amada shebekirbo, the righteousness and understanding which is in their hearts. Lo yuchal liot shafel, it cannot be that they are low. Afilu im hamatoros hein legamri mutuos, even if their ultimate goal is completely messing up, is completely making a mistake, right? And again, now you see Rav Kook in the same way. He's taking a swipe at the Gedolim. He's also taking a swipe at the Zionists, right? He's taking a swipe at the generation. He always does. He plays both ends, right? Right? Even if what they're fighting for, even if they're completely messing up, to cast off Torah and mitzvahs, right? Aval ruchohu niskav gadol va'adir. But you should know their spirit is greater, right? Their spirit is greater, and the ideals are mamash amazing, right? So you see, Rav Kook is describing over here how the souls have gotten bigger. There are bigger souls that have come down, and we need to meet the demands. And yet, but he's also saying, yes, it's true. In his generation, these souls are making big mistakes. They're erring, right? Like the early Zionists are making mistakes. But it can't be such ideal people, such people that are willing to put their lives for the nation, right? It can't be that they're low souls, that these are the highest souls. And in our generation, we see the generation of language, right? We see the generation of revealing this, the generation that is moving from, moving away from behavior control and moving away from fear and moving towards a language of connection, a language of integration, right? Like, how much talk is there now about integration? Like, not just learning something intellectually, but really integrating to your being. There are breath workshops, right? And there's mindfulness. There's a Kavana app. Everyone can go to the Kavana app, designed for integration and Jewish mindfulness, right? There's bringing things down, giving people the experience that they're wanting for, the feelings of connection, and moving away. So it's not that our generation is so low, and what's going to be with the generation? How are they going to do it? But the generation is so high, and the generation is moving towards Geula. It's amazing. It's the elevation of the generation, and it's incredible. Like, we have the highest souls. Our kids, first of all, it's us, we ourselves, right? Think, oh, so broken, so this, so that. It's true. But in that comes a new thing. Comes, right? The seed has to decay and rot away. There needs to be a COVID. There needs to be all these ridiculous things till something new emerges, right? October 7th, right? It rots away the erosion of what people think until new leadership comes in, We don't want Bibi, right? We want Mashiach ben David. That's who we want, right? We want a Melech Meshuach. We want a proper king, not one that waffles. One that understands that you have to get rid of them, right? You have to kibush, gerush, and hityavshut, right? And one that has to conquer the land, right? Not just give it back and bring in more players. Not just reverse the Oslo agreement of putting people in, now swapping out the British mandate with the American mandate, right? That's not what we want. We don't want an American mandate. We don't want to reverse the history and put in a new British mandate and just call it the American mandate and be buttled to everything, right? We want to settle the land, to take the reins, to have leaders, because after October 7th, everything that's happening, there's a new thing occurring. The generations are getting stronger, as I once said from Moshe Feiglin, the MK, right? He said, what's the most shocking thing? The most shocking thing is, you look at the generation and they're like, oh, they're on TikTok and YouTube and then all these things they're coming at. But now it comes to war, they all want to go in, right? Everyone's understanding this with the Chatufim, right? That we need strong leadership, not to be scared. Fearless, right? Like he's talking about, fear doesn't work. We're fearless. We need to go in, and the old rots away and the new generation comes, and we're going to see Mamish Mashiach. We're Mamish going to see the Geula, and we're going to take back Gaza. We're not going to give back the hamon, right? We're going to expand into Lebanon because that is really biblical borders, right? And we're going to we're going to be expansionists, not self-preservationists, right? We're going to be Mamish expansionists. Okay. Amen. Yeah.